Okay, very good morning to you if you're in the Caribbean or the Americas. Good afternoon if you're in Europe and the Middle East. And a very good evening to you if you're tuning in from the Asia Pacific region. Warm welcome to today's Crossing Borders broadcast, which is, of course, the IMC streaming service created to keep investment migration professionals connected and informed. If you haven't seen one of these broadcasts, don't worry, you can watch on our Catch Up YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe for all the updates we publish there. Remember, for today, you can ask questions using the widget on the right of your screen, where you'll also find some useful handouts. And to keep you engaged, we'll have a little bit of polling too. So to test this out, you should start seeing a poll on your screen, which I'm going to launch. And we're interested to know whereabouts in the world you are watching from today. So typically we wait till about 80% of viewers have voted. Just getting to that now. Okay, I'm going to close that off and share the results on the screen with you. So overwhelmingly 83% of today's viewers are from Europe and Africa, and 70% from the Americas. So that's super interesting for us and today's speaker. We're going to move right on to a second poll. So I'm going to hide this one and ask you about the UN Sustainable Goals. So our question is, how familiar are you with the concept of sustainable development? Okay, so I'm going to shut that off and share the results. As you can see, well, good. 71% of you are very knowledgeable about sustainable development, and 29% of you are not at all. And that's interesting for us to drive the conversation with today's speaker. So in this edition of Crossing Borders, we are going to deep dive into the little known UN Sustainable Development Goals, otherwise colloquially known as the SDGs, but importantly, how investment migration has the potential to advance the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. And today with me, I have Professor Andres Solimano, who is, of course, the incoming chairman of the IMC. He's also the founder and chairman of the International Center for Globalization and Development, a former country director of the World Bank, executive director at the Inter-American Development Bank, and director at the United Nations. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please use the widget on your control panel. So I'm delighted to introduce you, Andres.
Hello, Bruno. I'm not sure I am on the screen.
You're not. Let's see if we can get you on the screen.
Yeah, I think I'm on the screen now.
Fantastic. Good morning. Great. You're in Santiago.
Yes. This is 9:35 here in Santiago, Chile. And I'm delighted to be here, Bruno. I see how the cross-border seminar series is moving along well under your leadership. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Andres, I hope you've had your first coffee of the day, because I'm going to dive straight into some questions that we've prepared, some questions that we've received ahead of this broadcast. I would, though, first like to draw our delegates' attention to an excellent paper that you wrote for us just about a year ago now on the subject of investment migration, economic development, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I think I'm showing that on my screen. That was published with your Center for Globalization in Chile. It's absolutely available on our website for a free to download. So if you are interested in the UN and sustainable development, then I do suggest you grab yourself a complimentary download copy of the publication. But yeah, Andres, first of all, please can you tell us, please give us a brief, I guess, introduction to UN SDGs and what do they aim to achieve?
Yes, yes. Well, the United Nations General Assembly gathered in September of 2015, and they put together and they passed a resolution to approve what was called a framework for sustainable development for a 15-year period, about to end in 2030. In that framework, the idea is how to set policy objectives and policy actions by governments and civil society and the private sector to achieve a set of goals, running from the reduction of poverty, investment in social sector like education, health, the building of physical infrastructure, and above all, a new awareness on the importance to respect planetary boundaries and ecosystems, and deal with the complicated issue of climate change. They set like 17 goals and 150 policy actions, and the agreement was signed by more than 180 countries and set a sort of roadmap to guide countries, high-income countries, middle-income countries, low-income countries, to take actions to achieve these objectives of sustainable development. The term means development that can be sustained over time. It's not that you grow fast for 3, 4, 8 years, and then you have to stop growth because you are harming the environment or because you are creating too high inequality in the country that's producing some sort of social destabilization, etc. And then you have to put the brakes and then start all over again. No, here is a more sustained development concept. That's the idea. It's endorsed by the UN. The General Secretary of the UN set up a group that is monitoring the achievement of the goals. And in general, is subscribed at different degrees by national governments.
Right. Okay. That's clearly sounds like it's a huge project when the world has come together and agreed on these key points. There's 17 SDGs, which also includes the European Union as an observer here. What sort of capital? Let's talking about investment. What sort of capital investment is required by countries to implement these SDGs?
Well, the UN made an initial estimate around 2015, 2016, that the world as a whole needed around $7 trillion to mobilize resources to achieve these goals, because you have to invest, let's say, in prevention of mitigation of climate change. You have to invest in roads. You have to invest in ports. You have to build new hospitals, new schools. You have to create jobs. One of the goals is a so-called decent jobs objective, jobs that are well paid, that the workers have access to social security, etc. So you need a lot of money. The estimates is around $7 trillion per year. It's a flow per year. For developing countries, middle income and low income countries, the estimate is around $4 billion. clearly this amount cannot be coped with just by the public sector, particularly in the current juncture in which governments are running fiscal deficit, etc., because of the COVID and the recession induced by the measures to contain it. So in terms of financing the UN SDGs, the idea is to have a concerted effort engaging the private sector, the public sector, civil society organization, etc. It's because it's a lot of money. My ballpark estimate that this 7 trillion is going to be too low, too optimistic. Perhaps we should be talking about 10 trillion realistically, and for developing countries, 6 trillion.
Yeah,
which was estimated 5 years ago, and we didn't have COVID, we didn't have the shocks of the last year, this year, which is going to raise the resource requirements to meet the SDGs.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, a couple of things that sort of I retain from what you said is, you know, the specific SDGs like decent jobs, economic growth, and then the other thing is COVID-19, of course, because this was all planned before the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. So aside from the country differences, Andres, is the world on track to achieving the SDGs, and how has the pandemic threatened that progress, if it has at all?
Well, the UN Secretary General appointed a high-level team of scientists. Note that he's not incorporating just economists and social scientists, but incorporating scientists from physical sciences, because one of the challenges is ecosystems, planetary boundaries, etc. Well, this team, before COVID-19, issued a report that the world as a whole was lagging behind the meeting of the goals. Of course, this is a 15-year program. It ends up 10 years, in 9 years from now. So you cannot expect meeting the goals, all the goals now. But if you spread the achievement by years, we were lagging behind. Because of COVID-19 and its economic and social consequences, I think the challenge will be much higher in terms of achieving the goals in a decade or so. The resource requirements are going to go up, and also social needs. You have a drop in GDP last year. The world as a whole contracted between 7.5% and 8%. You have an increase in unemployment, an increase in poverty, slashing down budgets to education, public infrastructure to cope with the health needs. So this has been a big upset on the whole global economy and global system.
So what's impact can investment migration have on sustainable development goals? And you talked a little bit about climate change, decent jobs, potable water, schooling. So what's the impact that you as an economist can see investment migration have on trying to achieve these SDGs?
Yes, well, I think investment migration, that's basically bringing funds from abroad, people that want to invest in countries in different activities, maybe real estate, maybe social investment, maybe in manufacturing, etc. Bring resources, bring entrepreneurial skills, bring useful traits that constitute a resource transfer to the recipient nation. And these resources, also people that come in these programs under the rubric of resident by investment or citizenship by investment, they have to pay a fee. So this money goes to the government. And the government may use this money to, let's say, finance roads, finance the building of hospital, etc. So these are all goals of the SDGs. There is the 17 goals include investment in different areas of the economy, and investment migration can contribute to that. In small countries, small islands of the Caribbean, for example, these resources may represent from 10% of the public sector budget to 40% or even higher. These resources are very important in small countries, in island states, etc. They help, for example, in Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica to cope with hurricanes, Hurricane Maria in 3-4 years ago, and the other. And studies show that around 40 to 50% of the reconstruction after these natural disasters was funded by investment migration money. So in small countries, the impact can be large. In economies of a bigger size, let's say the UK, the Canada, the US, etc., Australia, the impact may be smaller because the size of these programs are smaller, but at the margin can contribute to create jobs, to generate new production, bring new skills, entrepreneurial traits. Still, the numbers are I mean, the investment migration industry mobilize around $7 to $8 billion per year, which is not a small amount. But within the total resource mobilization of the world, the national financial market, still small. So we have to put this in perspective. But I think on the whole, the impact can be very positive from investment migration to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, both by the UN and subscribed by the governments.
Okay. Turning to service providers, because you touched upon it slightly there, and I want to go a little bit deeper into this. A lot of the service providers report that most of their clients who are considering investment migration programs prefer passive investments rather than, let's say, real estate, which we know is the only route into the US through the EB5 program. But a number of programs now also have options, either a real estate option or a passive investment option. I wonder how governments can strike a balance, actually, and strike the right balance between passive investments and perhaps other options that are available to them. What's your perspective on this as an economist?
Yeah, this is an important question, Bruno. I think the programs, at some point, the investment migration programs, both RBIs and CBIs, should move more toward a higher proportion of the resources going to active investments. And here the challenge is how to convince the demand side, people that want to subscribe to these programs, to engage in more active investments. You want to encourage people to invest in real factories, I mean, in high-tech sectors, in mitigation of climate change. You want to invest in social activities. I don't know, putting money in a pool, an investment pool that invests in hospitals, for example. So you need to reshift, in a way, the directions of the funds coming through investment migration to these sectors, which are more aligned with the concept of sustainable development. But at the same time, you have to strike a balance between the preferences of people that subscribe these programs. Those that want to go to Canada, those that want to go to France or the UK or New Zealand or Australia, etc. The passive investment modality is simpler. I mean, you have less headaches if you buy a financial instrument. issued by the government, issued by the private sector, than if you have to set up a company and deal with the uncertainties that all investment, real investment bring about. So you have to, it's easier to engage, to put your money in terms in passive investment, though the profitability of the investment in passive vehicles could be lower than the profitability of investment in active investments. Okay, though the risk pattern or the variance of the returns in technical terms may be higher in active investment rather than in passive investment. So you have to do a balance. What the government can do, perhaps they can create some incentives for people coming under the investment migration programs to encourage those that prefer active investment vehicles. For example, fast track, that you, in general, this industry moves relatively fast, but it could be perhaps you enter into sort of fast track, provided all due diligence, all the legal paperwork, etc. Requirements are met. If you say, I want to set up a company in a depressed area of the country that would create jobs and income for the population there. Or I have a good idea to mitigate the increasing of the level of sea levels. The island of Vanuatu that is thinking in putting together, or has, I think, an investment migration program, face the problem that the sea level is increasing and the island may be underwater in 30, 50 years from now. The whole country may disappear. So it's urgent to think in imaginative ways to cope with this problem. Well, here you give fast track to the people, or you reduce the fee, perhaps. The government may say you have to put 500,000 euros or 500 or 700,000 US dollars as investment. Okay, if you do investment that we consider in line with sustainable development goals, perhaps you may get a discount. The fee may be lower. So you can create economic incentives, financial incentives, to redirect investment from passive to active tools. This is a field that requires creative thinking, but it's very important. In the first generation of programs, of course, passive investment was the main door to entry into the countries. I understand that the people, the participants, may tend to prefer that, and also the age profile of the participant matter. I mean, people from 35 to 45 years, as I understand now, are an increasing part of people interested in getting residence by investment or citizenship by investment. They may be still in a working age or more active. They prefer active investment, whereas a retired person, 65 years old, they may prefer a passive investment modality. So you have to consider the demographic profile also in the decision.
Yeah, the profiles are quite important, aren't they, of the clients? We've had a question that's come in in the system through an anonymous viewer, and it reads, with the SDGs in mind, how should governments make best use of investment migration funds? And I think that's a really good question, actually, because it's absolutely current with what we're talking about. And we know that on the passive investment side, there is now a very deep, huge sovereign wealth funds that are being created by these programs all over the world. So how should governments deploy those funds, keeping in mind the SDGs?
Yes, this is a good question, indeed. I would say the following. the SDGs provide a sort of roadmap to governments. Say, look, your priorities should consider physical investment, but also social investment and investment in climate change mitigation and the protection of ecosystems. Planetary boundaries are extremely important these days because for example, we can overcome COVID and other pandemic with vaccines. It takes time, etc., logistics challenge, etc. But there is no vaccine for global warming. Once we get to certain threshold, we are that's done. I mean, it's a much more complicated even than pandemics because they are irreversible. So this provides a blueprint to governments. So the government should deploy public investment into those sectors. Now, you mentioned a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, that this may go to a sovereign wealth fund. Not all countries use that modality because this is more sophisticated. You are subject to, many governments receive the money and they use the money for different needs, and money fungible. At the end of the day, you don't know exactly where the money is going because money fungible. But if you put the money into a sustainable, into a wealth fund, you are subject to certain rules of the wealth fund. For example, the fund can invest only the return not the principal, because you don't want the principal to be eaten, the fund to be eaten. So to be financially sustainable, you invest just the interest payments on the funds. Some countries have sovereign wealth funds that, for example, Chile and also Norway, they have to invest only in financial assets, and in the Chilean sovereign fund have to be financial assets abroad. They cannot buy government securities of the Chilean government. So essentially, they give the money to a central bank, and the central bank hire investment an investment company in the US or in Europe that buy securities, stocks and bonds, etc. That's one modality. In Norway, it's more or less similar. It's basically their big oil fund. But other countries, for example, Finland, now is changing the modality, is creating an investment, sovereign wealth fund that will allow the fund to invest in high-tech companies in Finland. Nokia, for example. Nokia had a peak in 15 years ago, and they went down, and they want to revive Nokia. So they want to use the investment fund as an industrial policy to promote high-tech industries. It's a different modality that if you use the money just to invest in financial assets abroad, of the Chilean type or the Norwegian type or other types of Saudi Arabia probably. So this is a very interesting area of concern. So I think the investment migration money may go to a sovereign fund. This would be a good innovation rather than going to the general budget and being used in ways that you are not completely, you cannot keep exact track of how the money is being used. It may be used probably most of the money for good purposes. In the Caribbean was used to rebuild infrastructure damaged by hurricanes and natural disasters, shocks. But in other countries, the situation may be different. So it's a good idea. It's an important point, I think, linking investment migration money with sovereign funds.
Right. I want to ask you a question. In the course of your research, have you found that there is an abundant availability of data and statistics that is coming from the countries that run investment migration programs on how they are deploying the earned capital, the investments that they are obtaining from investment migrants? Investors?
Yeah, well, there is a tendency, particularly in small islands or states, and also in Greece, yes, Southern Europe, Greece, Spain, Portugal, to invest in the tourist sector. Okay, build hotels, build resorts, golf courses, etc. Okay, this is fine also because countries earn their foreign exchange and it's a source of income, the tourist industry. Now, after COVID, that we need a rethinking because perhaps the post-COVID world will be a world with a smaller size tourist sector. Okay, so it would make much sense. Would not make much sense to keep pouring resources coming from investment migration to, at the same rate at least, of the situation before COVID into the real estate related activities. Now, in other countries, there is some evidence. For example, in the US, the program is called EB5, one of the programs,
Right.
employment-based. Basically, you have to create jobs, at least 10 jobs per year in a venture to qualify for this residence by investment program. So programs are oriented to create jobs. Hopefully good quality jobs and decent jobs in the terminology of the International Labor Office. But you create jobs. Then we need more empirical evidence, statistical basis to see to what extent they are contributing these funds to create new technologies, and to what extent these new technologies go to sectors like digitalization, for example, to avoid physical contact. In the future will be very important in a world hit by pandemic. Or things oriented to mitigate climate change. But the empirical evidence is still not very robust, showing that investment migration money is going to those sectors necessarily. So they may be going, but we need to have a better statistical basis, data to back up these presumptions with more hard evidence. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I'm moderating.
still the numbers show that real estate is the preferred sector.
All right, Andres, looking a bit to the future, you just mentioned COVID, of course. We've been living this reality for now 12 months. So in essence, we're moving into the second year of the pandemic. Much of Europe is back into a third quite hard lockdown over the European religious Easter break. We've seen that the UK has seemingly quite successfully begun the rollout of its vaccine program. It's probably fair to say that it's far more advanced than the European program, which has been coordinated by the European Commission in Brussels. So most of Europe is very much lacking behind in vaccinating its populations. How do you see investment migration will develop in the years to come? Has COVID had an effect on this sector of legal migration, which is essentially what it is?
Yes, yes. Well, I think perhaps we may divide the answer in two parts. The supply of programs and the demand for programs. I see that the supply, meaning the supply by governments of either citizenship by investment, residence by investment, and the modalities under which people are needed in those programs. Here I see a big potential. Remember, Bruno, that these programs took off basically. They were created in the mid-80s in small islands of the Caribbean. But the real takeoff was between 2000, after 2009, 2010, then on.
Yeah.
After the global financial crisis of 2008 and 9, because government in many countries, both advanced economies and developing country emerging economies, needed fresh funds, needed money coming in to reactivate their economies, to create jobs, to stimulate investment, etc. So, this COVID crisis, the global contraction of GDP actually was less than 1%, half 0.7% between average between 2008 and 2009, if I'm not wrong, in that crisis, the global financial crisis of 2008 and 9. Now, GDP fell globally by near 8% to 2020. And 2021, though the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD are projecting positive growth, this is perhaps there will be positive growth because the base is smaller to 2020, but perhaps it will be not 5% or 6%, maybe much lower, because as you say, several countries, including mine, are in big lockdowns, and lockdowns prevent people to go to work, and shops to open, and factories have to close, etc. So product is not assured that 2021 will be a full recovery year. I think will be perhaps a year of some recovery, but it may take 2 or 3 years to recover the pre-crisis level of GDP. So after COVID, governments will need money, will need funds to restart investment, will need money to create jobs, to reduce poverty, etc. So though flows are not very big coming from this program in global terms, for specific countries can make an important difference. So I think there will be governments will, I mean, the supply of these programs will increase. And we see now big countries like Turkey or Jordan, etc., that were not in the game before and now are offering CBIs. So we may expect countries offer new programs. On the demand side, people wanted to move to other countries to make investment, or at least to have a sort of second passport, or there is the value of insurance went up. Okay, the value of insurance went up after this crisis, or it's going up during this crisis. The more uncertainties you face, the more is the value of protecting against these uncertainties. And these programs provide protection against uncertainties. People may move to countries with better health systems, for example, prevention and curation. They may move to countries that give more financial security to those coming, protection of property right, of wealth, etc. A better education facility for their children. I don't know, a broader supply of an offer of cultural activities, safer cities, better transportation systems. People will value those dimensions more after being locked down for a year, or not a full year, but experiencing lockdowns, lockout, etc. So I see an increase in the demand for investment migration programs because of the insurance value that these programs provide. And I see objective incentives for governments to set up more programs, or perhaps better programs in a way, more tied to the considerations that we are discussing in this workshop, like aligning to sustainable development objectives. Perhaps there is a change also between CBI and RBI, because if we live in a world where you have travel restrictions and closed borders, the demand for CBI, citizenship by investment, was more an indirect demand to having an instrument to move around without facing all the hassles visa requirements, etc. If we are going to live in a world with less international mobility of people, perhaps the demand for CBI will go down, but the demand for RBI, residence by investment, may go up, because you want to, the amenities and the traits that I just described before are more provided by the residence by investment program. So you may have a change in composition. But overall, I believe that there will be these hard times will be a push for the investment migration industry on the whole, because the demand consideration and supply considerations, but changes in composition too. You know, these are very interesting subjects for new research and for new thinking. How the investment migration industry will stand these big shocks that we are. I think it's going to stand well, but it will need also some changes, some directions.
Okay, staying on the subject of course, of the UN SDGs, one of the questions that came in is how countries are reporting milestones in the achievement of the SDGs, because really, essentially now we're talking about, a big global project when there's only 9 years left, because they, essentially go up to 2030. Now, of course, it's yet to be seen if the UN will extend the SDGs perhaps because of the pandemic, and say we will extend another 10 years to achieve those, because it takes a very long time to put these, these projects, global projects together, and to get all the countries to agree on the milestones. How are the countries doing in reporting the achievements of the milestones? Is there some empirical, research that's been carried out, some data that's available, something that you could share with us would be useful for our viewers, I think.
Yes. Well, there is a secretariat. The United Nations put together a secretariat of monitoring the achievement, the degree of achievement of the in the Sustainable Development Goal, to what extent governments are doing that. Then governments got committed, but here there is an uneven progress to create metrics, or the Secretariat also offered methodologies and metrics to measure the advancement of the progress in these programs. But in general, here you can measure things like, for example, you can credit to your Sustainable Development Goal account, so to speak, with the Secretariat, how many roads were paved, how many new hospitals, how many schools were built, a reduction in terms of the share of population below the poverty line, improvement in the Gini coefficient that measure economic inequality, wealth inequality, progress in terms of biodiversity, protection of biodiversity. Since the goals are so heterogeneous, of different dimensions, there is no one metric that will fit all dimensions. So there are countries that make more progress than others, and there are countries that started better. For example, Nordic countries started better in most of the scores. There is a high correlation between the level of GDP per capita and the degree of progress toward meeting the goals. In sub-Saharan Africa, of course, when you have problems of lack of water and sanitation, very basic things, or serious health problems, of course, worsened with the COVID, you are much handicapped to meet the goals that if you are living in Northern Europe, or that country have a very good social protection system, and also have a big awareness of the protection of the environment, and country with low inequality. I mean, they are high-income country with low inequality. Inequality is a big problem in the US. Used to be a problem in Latin America, in Africa, but now inequality, and this has been documented by many, and the Biden administration is taking very courageous steps to start reducing inequality. But it's a problem that of the last 40 years or so in the largest economy of the world. China also is a country where the Gini coefficient went up substantially if you compare the mid 80s with now. Okay, in the mid 80s, the Gini was like 25%, and now is closer to 40%. The higher the value, the higher the degree of inequality. So inequality is a target of the SDGs. So the progress is lower in that area than in others. It's easier to build schools and hospitals than reduce overall inequality, but you have to show a direction of progress. No, the answer is that progress is uneven, that the 2020 and 2021 are going to be a setback in achieving these goals, because government have lower resources to spend in this. The private sector also, because let's think that not only the government, the private sector also should spend resources in the SDGs. There is a contraction. The whole world is getting poorer. Not everybody. The Forbes list of billionaires increase their wealth because stock market went up. This is one of the paradoxes of the system. But as a whole, the world is being hit.
And it's an important point, of course, and unfortunately we're going to have to wrap things up because I'm told we're running out of time. But I think it's important, to note actually that you talk about the private sector, and actually the 17th goal of the SDGs is about community and forming partnerships between governments and the private sector. If you do want more information about the SDGs, of course, if you get a copy of the Investment Migration Yearbook that we published towards the end of last year, you will see that our cover story is all about the UN SDGs, and you can read an in-depth interview with Professor Solimano in that publication, which is available free of charge to download from our website. You can also go to the UN.SDG website to find out more about UN SDGs and how they are helping to advance economies and how the world is gearing itself up to contribute to the achievement of those 17 important goals. Of course, the IMC is a member of the UN's Economic and Social Council. We have been since 2019, and the SDGs was something that we started to map about 2 years ago with Professor Solimano on how investment migration contributes to the achievement of the SDGs, and it's been good to see that the investment migration community has started to listen, and we know that certain countries are a little bit more talkative now on how they are deploying funds from investment migration programs to achieving this sustainable development. So indeed, it is very much win-win pathways to sustainable development with the SDGs. I hope the audience at home, because I know most of you are back at home, have enjoyed and found today's session interesting as much as I have. It's always a pleasure to chat with Professor Solimano. If you want and have questions, please feel free to reach out to Andres directly. He's on LinkedIn, or you can write to me directly, and I'll happily put you in touch. Finally, if you're not a member of the IMC, then please visit our website for information about joining us and supporting our network of around 450 members from just over 50 different countries. We'll be back on the 14th of April at 2:30 Central European Time, and the subject of that, we will be looking at the changes that have taken place on the island nation of Malta in the Mediterranean. So we'll be looking at the changes that that government has made to the residency program that was launched recently, but also, of course, to the residency that leads to citizenship. So a type of hybrid residency and citizenship program that was also launched not so long ago. In the meantime, I thank you very much, and I hope you will stay well. Andres, once again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in person, either in Europe or in beautiful Santiago in Chile at some point. So from me, it's good night if you're in Asia, good morning if you're in the US, and good afternoon if you're in Europe. And for you, Andres, I wish you a nice day ahead, and I'll leave you with the IMC education and training introduction. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you very much. Wonderful conversation. Nice to see you.
Introducing the Certification in Investment Migration from the Investment Migration Council, the first structured learning product of its kind globally, designed for you. Explore the bite-sized learning pathway of each module on our custom online platform. You can track your progress as you go and learn at a pace that suits you, with an estimated 5 hours of study time per module. The Certification in Investment Migration contributes to the development of professional competencies and standards for those new to or already working in the industry. So, what are you waiting for? Visit our website to start your learning journey today.